Hey there, Hang Up listeners. Before we start the show, I want to let you know about a story coming up a little later. It's from one of our partners, SAP. AI comes at you fast. If you don't get reliable and relevant advice, your business might miss out. Whether you're looking to automate tasks or embed AI in your business processes, SAP can help. To learn more, head to sap.com/AI and stick around for expert advice on how to embrace AI with confidence. Hey there, Hang Up listeners. Before we start the show, I want to let you know about a story coming up a little later. It's from one of our partners, SAP. AI comes at you fast. If you don't get reliable and relevant advice, your business might miss out. Whether you're looking to automate tasks or embed AI in your business processes, SAP can help. To learn more, head to sap.com/AI and stick around for expert advice on how to embrace AI with confidence.
The following podcast includes explicit language, not restricted to words beginning with F, S, B, and Q. Hi, I'm Stefan Fatsis, and this is Hang Up and Listen for the week of August 5th, 2024. On this week's show, we'll take a little more than 9.784 seconds to talk about the incredible 100-meter dash finals that resulted in gold for American sprinters Noah Lyles and silver for Sha'Carri Richardson. Slate's Christina Cauterucci will join us to discuss the two women boxers at the Olympics who have faced a worldwide wave of hatred and bigotry. And finally, we'll chat about some of our favorite moments so far from the games. I'm the author of Word Freak, A Few Seconds of Panic, and Wild and Outside. I'm in Washington, D.C., so is Josh Levin. He's the author of The Queen and the host of an upcoming slow burn series for Slate on the rise of Fox News. Hey, Josh.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm here. Joel is not here on a day when we would all love for him to be here, and he would love to be here. So let's just all embody his spirit as we discuss the sprints.
In Joel's absence, it means we're going to have to talk about the 100 when he comes back. But we've got another sprinting prodigy with us for a third straight week from suburban Toronto. It's Morgan Campbell. He's a senior contributor at CBC Sports and the author of a new memoir, My Fighting Family, Borders and Bloodlines and the Battles That Made Us. Welcome again, Morgan.
Yeah, I think sprinting prodigy overstates it, but there is a chapter in the memoir that revolves around a picture that they took of me while I was running track in high school. And that one picture has just sort of followed me for the next 30 years. And it just made me look like a much better sprinter than I actually was.
Look, if Joel can be dining out on being the fastest 10-year-old, in quotes, all these years later, I think we can call you a sprinting prodigy.
I'll take it.
Now, as always, we want to thank our Slate Plus members for making this show possible. One way we do that is with a bonus episode. This week, we'll be joined by former Canadian Olympics hurdler Perdita Felicien, who is now a CBC Sports correspondent and Morgan Campbell's wife, and whose family is from St. Lucia, which won its first Olympics medal in the women's 100-meter dash over the weekend. You can hear that episode right now as long as you're a Slate Plus member. Subscribe by going to Apple Podcasts and clicking Try Free at the top of our show page, or visit slate.com/hangupplus to get access wherever you listen. One of the biggest pre-Olympics questions was whether nerdy, try-hard American sprinter Noah Lyles would live up to his braggadocio and seize the title of world's fastest human. And then, as we held our collective breath and waited to learn the winner of a microscopically close 100-meter dash at the Stade de France on Sunday, thoughts about Lyles' personality and self-promotion kind of vanished. After 28 seconds, photography determined that Lyles' clavicle crossed the finish line 5/1000ths of a second before Jamaican Kishane Thompson's clavicle. Lyles ripped off his race bib, motioned the camera closer, and shouted, "America, I told you, I got this." It was one of the most suspenseful moments in one of the greatest races in track history. Morgan, you're a former sprinter. You're married to a former Olympic sprinter. What was it like watching this race?
Sprinter in quotation marks, sprinter with an asterisk. Yeah, I ran in a little bit in high school, you know, as we discussed in the intro. It's that picture that makes me look a lot better than I ever was. But this race, there were several sort of subplots heading into this race. You know, the most prominent for the Americans being that they're there's been this huge promotional machine behind Noah Lyles in the months leading up to this event. There's talk about him winning 3 or possibly 4 golds, but you can't win 3 or 4 until you win 1. And the first one is tough because going into this race, he did not have the fastest time in the world. He did not have the fastest personal best. So by the numbers, there are a couple people faster than him, especially Kishane Thompson, who very quickly sort of established himself as the favorite. So if you had asked me before this race, I would have said Kishane Thompson is probably going to run like 972 because he ran 980 in the semis and looked like he had more to give. I thought Fred Curley was ascendant. I thought he was going to break 980, and I would have had Lyles and maybe Oblique Seville like tied right around 979. So the one thing I was right about.
You have told us in the past that you have a good track record of picking
yes.
who's going to win after the semis.
So the one thing I was right about was Lyles running 979. And what was amazing about this race was, one, we can appreciate these things more because there's what's happening now. And I think what a lot of mainstream fans are starting to learn is that there are absolute numbers nerds that love track and field and get off on track and field. And within 20 minutes of the end of that race, these people had 10-meter splits for every 10-meter segment of that race for every runner in the race. And what they told you was that Noah Lyles was in last place through the first 40 meters. He hit 50 meters in 7th place, and by 60 meters, he was in 3rd. So when you think about in terms of how masterfully, like, one, what a keen sense he has of what his top speed is and how masterfully he distributed his energy to get there. Because you can look at his splits relative to other people's splits. And we talked about this before, and people could say, well, he didn't have a good start. You know how we know he didn't have a good start? Because he was in last place at all these early intervals. But clearly that was his best start because he finished in a faster time than he has ever run in his life. And so he has such a well-developed sense of like what his strengths are and how to distribute his energy to get the most out of his strengths. And it was really on display. He hit the highest top speed in that race, 12.1 meters per second, which, context for you guys, it's fucking flying. That is what 12.1 meters per second mean. And he had the least amount of deceleration over the final 30 meters. And that was what won him the race. It was a masterclass of patient sprinting. And most people can't do that because, one, they don't have the same top speed as Noah Lyles, and they just aren't as patient as he is. He's really what he's revealed himself to be over the course of the season, over the course of that race, is a trust the process guy. Because when he lost that race in Jamaica in May, he didn't panic. When he got outrun in the heats and the semis here, he didn't panic. Within this race, he's hitting all these early intervals behind everyone else. He didn't panic. He knew what he had to do. He trusted the process, his technique, his top speed, his speed endurance, and was rewarded for it.
That's super smart. I'd never considered this idea that the best start, even if it's the one that has you in last place, is the one that has you running your best time and ending up in the lead. That's really interesting. And also, I would say, like, the biggest surprise for me in this race, it wasn't necessarily that Noah Lyles won. It was that after the, like, pulling out the Yu-Gi-Oh cards during the Olympic trials, there wasn't anything that he did kind of around the race with his personality and antics, or however you want to describe it. Like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Morgan, but it didn't seem like he did anything kind of extra special or different. And then after the race, when he thought that he had lost and he went to Kishane Thompson and said, like, I think you got this, there was a humility there. And then even after he won, there was a humility, I think, in the victory. He did say, America, I told you I got this. He ripped off his bib. But it was like, based on the kind of level that he's had before, our expectations, I would have expected him to, like, I don't know, do something the likes of which we'd never seen before. But it seemed like humbled in being the world's fastest man.
And that moment when he goes up to Kishane Thompson, I thought was indelible because it's just two athletes waiting to see what happened. There's no ego. They've been stripped bare. Their fate is going to be determined by someone looking at a photograph or a computer analyzing a photograph and then flashing a result on a scoreboard. It was really, I think, one of the most human moments of the game. I mean, the stadium is totally dead quiet. Everyone is waiting for this. They just look like two dudes waiting to find out what happened. And I think you're right, Josh. After the race, Lyles was generous. He wasn't as full of himself for whatever reasons that are part of his personality that we've come to expect. His first tweet, I think after the race, was, "I have asthma, allergies, dyslexia, ADD, anxiety, and depression, but I will tell you that what you have does not define what you can become. Why not you?" He did go on to say, "I want my own sneaker. Ain't no money in spikes," but that's a really smart thing to do because there ain't no money in spikes, and he should have his own signature shoe. So good for Noah Lyles. I hope he cashes in, man.
I think what you guys are getting at is that so much of what we have seen from Noah Lyles for the last few months has been so contrived and so micromanaged by all these brand entities. And this moment, this race, the race itself and the moments after the race were too big for this character he is playing to contain. And like the actual Noah Lyles broke out of this character that's been sort of confining him the last few months. And we actually saw him act like Noah Lyles, the man, and not Noah Lyles, the brand, but the Noah Lyles, the character he's been playing in these commercials, all these months. And yeah, that was really endearing. And it's funny, humbled sort of, but don't ever get it confused. All these dudes are extremely full of themselves, but it's a job requirement, right? Like all these months where Noah Lyles is watching somebody from Jamaica run a little bit faster, and he got to hear all this social media chatter. The Jamaicans are mad at him because he got a Jamaican girlfriend. They went to Kingston for that track meet, and what Noah Lyles did was he went to KFC in Kingston because apparently KFC in the Caribbean is way better than KFC in anywhere else in the world. And there's a lineup naturally, but Noah Lyles cut the line at the Kingston KFC. And that I think was unforgivable. So he's been hearing it from these Jamaicans for 2 months because every time he loses, right? But the thing about him is even after, I remember this moment now during US trials, Noah Lyles has just run whatever he runs in the 983 neighborhood. And then somebody tells him that Kishane Thompson has been running faster in Jamaica. And Noah just kind of shrugs and says, hope he stays healthy. But just to be able to react to news of somebody running faster than you have ever run and just take that in stride, because in your head, you know, and in your heart, you believe, like your self-confidence is set up to tell you that it does not matter how fast that person runs. I am set up to run faster. I am trending towards running faster. That takes an amazing amount of self-belief, because I can tell you, like if me in that position, I just run 980 something. And then someone else is like, yo, your friend just ran 977. What are you going to do with that? I'd be like, shit. I don't know. But it did not break his cool. It's like, again, it's a self-belief. And because if you go ask Kishane Thompson, he's like, okay, well, I ran 979 this time. Next time I'll beat him. And you have to think that way. You have to believe that way. Otherwise, don't line up.
All right, let's talk about the women's final, which was not a photo finish. Julian Alfred of St. Lucia won by 15 hundredths of a second over Sha'Carri Richardson. We're going to talk more about this in the Slate Plus episode this week with your wife, Morgan Perdita Felicia. Yes. But my kind of, layperson's analysis, which I'm hoping you can correct or expand on, was that Sha'Carri Richardson has always been known for her poor starts and coming back. And so, yeah, I guess maybe I'll skip the analysis. Was this an example of actually this was a bad start, or was this the classic Sha'Carri Richardson race and she just got beat even, running her race?
A couple things at work here. One, Julian Alfred has just been on this steady climb for the last couple of years, and she's sort of been ready for this breakthrough. And what Julian Alfred executed was basically the perfect race, according to what her skill set is. She's very good in the first 60. She's a world indoor champ. She's very good in the 200, even though she claims not to like that race. So you put that sort of speed endurance together and the patience that a 200-meter runner needs, but also just the explosiveness and raw acceleration that a good 60-meter runner needs. You put them together and, just like Noah Lyles did, just figure out the best way to distribute your energy. You have what you saw from Julian Alford. Like, that wasn't a fluke. And, you know, some of the talk is, well, the three Jamaicans weren't there. It's not really a real title if you didn't beat the three Jamaicans. But again, you can only race the people that are there, and injecting Shericka Jackson as she is right now, who's clearly injured because she is scratched from 2 events. Like, current Shericka Jackson wasn't going to make a dent in that race. Current Shelly-Ann Fraser-Price was not going to make a dent in that race. And so it's not about beating a name. It's about beating the people that are lined up across from you. Now with Sha'Carri, I think Joel and I talked about this a couple weeks ago. Like, her superpower has been to stay patient, no matter how poor her start is, and still go through the phases of her race and still find a way to hit her top speed at the right time, and bring it home. If anyone in this race, but it's a weird thing that sort of happened there. Cause one, to lose by 0.15 of a second at that level, that you might as well have lost by a week. That is a yawning margin. But two is, the funny thing about Sha'Carri is that this was the one time you sort of saw her panic when somebody next to her gets a really good start. Because again, by the numbers and by just the skill set, we know that Sha'Carri is capable of running 10.72 or faster, even with a start that we don't think is good. But you can see her sort of panic in that race. I was talking to Donovan Bailey, ran into him at CBC because he was getting ready to do a segment. If you guys remember Donovan Bailey, he was a former world record holder, ran 9.84 in the 96 Olympics, gold medalist, world champion. You know, really knows his stuff. And he was talking to me about the semis and the finals because I was telling him I thought Sha'Carri was going to get it together for the finals. And he's like, no. You should have looked a little bit more closely at her in the semifinals next to Alfred, because there's a point in the race where they both shift gears. And at that point, Sha'Carri is just used to blowing past people. And she wasn't closing on Alfred like she thought she was. And he said that probably got into her head. So when the finals unfolded again the same way, this is what Donovan Bailey was telling me. He's like, it's not a surprise that she panicked because she knew that she wasn't going to be able to reel in Alfred the way she normally does other people. And she just sort of tightened up. But like, credit to her for getting back into that race and getting silver, because it could have gone all the way downhill for her and it didn't. And this is why I'm saying, like, people have this binary view of Olympic success, but you look at the big picture of Sha'Carri's career trajectory. Yeah, she's not going to be happy with how she executed that race, but silver medal in the Olympics, that's not a failure. Okay. You lost the race, but like overall, you got an Olympic medal, you're winning.
Sha'Carri won't be running in the 200. She didn't qualify at the U.S. trials. She will be, in all likelihood, running a relay. Noah Lyles did qualify for the 200, and he is going for the Michael Johnson 100,
he qualified.
200.
He qualified.
Yeah. So that, I think, is, if he can do the 200, the humility that we saw, we may see a different Noah Lyles if he blows the field away.
Absolutely no reason for him to be humble in the 200.
Also, keep in mind, he is a much better 200-meter runner than he is a 100-meter runner.
Yes, he is.
And this is what has a lot of the hardcore track nerds sort of rankled, is that how is a 200-meter guy beating the 100-meter specialists? And I don't know. He just is. As Carl Lewis says, tell them to fix their finish. Worried about his start.
In our next segment, we'll talk to Slate's Christina Cauterucci about the campaign against 2 women boxers at the Olympics.
This podcast is brought to you by Slate Studios and SAP. AI is moving so fast. If you don't get reliable and relevant advice, your business might miss out. Welcome to Dear Artie, an advice column from SAP, where we tackle the tricky questions at the intersection of AI and business. Let's meet our expert.
Hi, I'm Ian Khan. I'm a technology futurist, speaker, and author, and I love to help organizations measure their current state of readiness for an AI-driven world. I'm excited to dive into today's question.
Dear Artie, our finance team is top-notch, but small. How can AI support them? Signed, Financially Drained.
Well, financially drained, a lot is happening in finance and AI, and the possibilities are endless. First of all, AI can help your finance team analyze massive amounts of financial data faster than any human or a team of people could do. Second, it can help perform functions on data through algorithms. This can connect different systems together and really simplify decision-making for your finance team. And last but not least, AI can help reduce the time needed for data to provide insights so that your leaders can make faster decisions.
Embrace AI with confidence. Head to sap.com/AI to learn more.
If there's one thing sports fans love as much as watching games, it's talking about them, especially the stats. Here's one that's super simple to remember. Discover automatically doubles the cash back earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cash Back Match. That means with Discover, you could turn $150 cash back to $300. That's right. You could put it towards some memorabilia you've had your eye on, or treat yourself to a premium sports network. You earn and Discover doubles. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
Last year, the boxers Imane Khalif of Algeria and Lin Yuting of Taiwan were accused by a discredited Russian-led boxing federation of failing an unspecified test for gender eligibility. The International Olympic Committee dismissed the allegations and certified the women to compete in Paris. But after news of the tests went public last week, and after Khalif's first opponent quit 46 seconds into their bout, the boxers became the targets of sexist and transphobic culture war attacks from right-wing media outlets, celebrities, and regular online bigots. Christina Cauterucci is a senior writer for Slate, the host of Outward, a podcast about queer life, and the host of Slow Burn Season 9, Gays Against Briggs, about a landmark 1970s civil rights battle. She's been following the Olympics boxing story for the magazine, and she is here now. Hey, Christina.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Good to have you. This has been one of the most grotesque displays of misinformation and hatred ever generated by an Olympics, I think. The boxers, meanwhile, have reached the semifinals in their weight categories and are each guaranteed at least a bronze medal. How did this story spiral so far and so fast?
In some way, this is sort of a classic story of misinformation spreading on the internet due to the sort of right-wing media hurricane that whips up every time somebody talks about gender. So right now, the issue of trans women's participation in sports is sort of top of the list of the Republican talking points. Legislatures all over the country are trying to ban trans kids from participating in sports. They're talking about how trans women shouldn't be able to compete in elite athletics. And the bottom line here is that neither Khalif nor Lin are trans, but because the International Boxing Association came out and said that these two boxers failed a gender test, the antenna went up for anybody who likes to talk about why people who diverge from the gender norm shouldn't be able to participate in sports. And so there's just been a whirlwind of misinformation, people claiming that these two boxers are trans, people claiming that these two boxers are men, when in actuality, not only are they women who've always participated in sports as women and competed without issue as women, but there's actually not been any documentation provided by the IBA that even says why they failed the gender tests that the organization put forth. And so the reason why it spiraled out of control is basically that this is an issue that benefits people who like to define gender in as narrow a way as possible, and in order to advance their own political agenda. But it really has very little, if anything, to do with what's happening with these two boxers in the Olympics.
First thing we got to keep in mind is that boxing, and I only say this because I cover a lot of boxing. I've been covering boxing for a long time. The boxing world is full of charlatans. And if you don't understand that, then it is easy for you to fall for what's coming from the IBA in terms of this quote unquote information about these two women allegedly failing a gender test. Now we, in the public, but also in the mainstream media, because I understand why right-wing bad faith actors are going to take a discredited organization at their word when quoting what they said to a Russian news agency. I understand why they think they can take that and run with it. What I never understood was why mainstream press organizations were so eager to accept this framing. And a lot of it is folks don't understand that the boxing world is full of charlatans. So when you see International Boxing Association, you see the word president, you think all these people are really credible. Whereas a little bit of digging will tell you that IBA is not running the boxing tournament in the Olympics this year because the IOC banished them essentially for long-running corruption. Also the fact that the president, Umar, I forget Umar's last name, but he's on Twitter right now ranting. He's calling this tournament sodomy. So now you're telling me that if I am a mainstream press organization, I should take these people at their word in terms of what they're saying about somebody's gender? None of that adds up. And we haven't even gotten to the fact that these two athletes have passed whatever gender tests were before. They passed them. They passed all of them up until 2023, until mid-tournament. It was not even like they got disqualified on the way into the 2023 Worlds. It was mid-tournament. Somebody came back to them with some paper and said, hey, we changed the rule apparently, and now you're outside the rule. Go home. And so the right-wing bad faith information grifters that we encounter all the time, I understand why they're picking up this ball and running with it. But the real damage comes when the mainstream press frames this also as some type of gender conflict and frames these two athletes as people who have failed a test as opposed to people who have showed up with the same equipment to every competition, and somebody changed the rules in ways that they have never made clear to anyone just to exclude these two athletes. And those are two very different things, and we know that.
Yeah. And just to defend the mainstream press for a moment. Now, I think it's hard to understand exactly what's going on here, in part because on the IOC's own database, all it said was basically what the IBA said, which was that these two competitors failed the gender test at the 2023 World Championships. Now the IOC is coming out with more statements saying like, well, actually, we don't fully trust this organization. And in fact, they hadn't, certified this organization since 2019 because of, like you said, corruption and because, Gazprom, the Russian state oil company, was like the sole funder. And in fact, Khalif was only disqualified after beating a Russian boxer. So there are a lot of reasons to not trust the IBA. But the fact that now the right wing has run with this controversy as some sort of example of trans people cheating in sports, or as they're saying, men beating up women on the national stage and everyone clapping for it, it's increased the likelihood that mainstream news organizations will publish their own misinformation about it. The Boston Globe ran with a headline that called them transgender boxers. And this just goes to show that the temperature on this debate is so high, the possibility for misinformation is so high, because the issue itself with the two organizations, the IOC and the IBA, is so complicated that it feels like, to the detriment of these two women, the conversation has gotten out ahead of the truth so far that it's, for the average person just tuning in today, I think it could be really hard to understand what's going on.
The IOC has never been the good guy, is never the good guy, will never be the good guy. But in this case, they are the defenders of these women against this bad and corrupt boxing organization. At least that's the storyline. I would say that fitting into my frame that the IOC has never done anything good is that they allowed this to happen by their inaction earlier, and they're now kind of stepping in and defending them and playing the hero. It's like too little too late in some ways, or in many ways, and in terms of the attacks that these women have been subjected to. And so they allowed the IBA, this organization that was apparently run for a long time by someone who was involved in heroin trafficking, they allowed it to exist and run boxing for probably, Morgan, maybe when you chime in next, you can tell us, but I don't know, decades longer than it should have, years longer, I don't know. And it seems like the IBA now is pissed off and is trying to get its licks in and knows the exact kind of buttons to push here. And so I think everybody's guilty in some way. And I'd also think that under clear rules and under a different regime, if this was track. If the people running track and field or running boxing, maybe these women wouldn't have been eligible. But under these rules and under this regime, and based on everything that that we knew, everything that the women knew for years going into this, as Morgan said, they were eligible. And so everybody just needs to accept that and allow them to compete. And I also think that the people that Christina are talking about, who latch on to all of these kind of culture war issues, any claim that they have that they're just reasonable and following the science and defending women in sports, anytime any of these people call them call them men, there's just no rational or reasonable person or argument to call them men. It's just they're women. You could argue, I don't think there's evidence. Nobody's provided evidence, but maybe there's like some universe in which you could argue that they shouldn't be eligible to compete in the Olympics because of whatever, just the same things we were talking about when we were talking with Rose Eveleth about the women who aren't eligible to compete in track. You could argue that. But to argue that they're men assaulting women, that it just proves that you're a charlatan. It's not just the IBA people that are charlatans, Morgan.
No. Well, again, and the difference with track and field, as shaky as their evidence has always been around these testosterone rules, at least those testosterone rules are clear and they're published and we know what the standard is. You know, they had these little studies trying to correlate testosterone levels, endogenous testosterone levels in women to performance in certain events, when it was clear what they were just trying to do was take the events that Caster Semenya was participating in and say, here's where your testosterone advantage is, just to cut her out of the pack. But at least, and they've, if you've been following, they've sort of lowered that testosterone threshold year by year. But again, at least this stuff is published. And if World Athletics says this person is ineligible because they missed this testosterone threshold, we understand, even if we don't agree with it, we understand what the rule is. We understand, what we understand the ways that they don't fit into World Athletics' gender category. What we have here with these boxers is something completely different. We've had two women who have always been eligible, always been fine, hasn't been a problem except the fact that, I guess, Khalif has been more successful than Umar Kremlev wanted her to be. And then all of a sudden there's this gender rule, but we don't know what the gender rule is. We don't know if it's because they think these women are intersex. We don't know if it's because they think they're trans. We don't know what it is. If it's just vibes. I get vibes from her. Sorry, man, she got to go. We don't get any of that. All we know is that they changed the rule and all of a sudden these two women are outside of the rule. But again, because it comes from an international sporting organization and because their president can say this so authoritatively, it seems like really solid, credible information when again, in reality, it's just sort of run-of-the-mill corrupt boxing chicanery.
And Christine, I think it's important to point out that this in some ways is a story as old as women participating in sports. Men who run sports organizations have sought, as we heard from Rose Eveleth, the host of Tested, and have read in the wake of this boxing scandal, men who run sports have looked for ways to question the ability and permissibility of women to compete. Lindsay Gibbs wrote a piece for Time the other day that went into some of the history of women who have been questioned. And it's happened during this Olympics to women who we've never even thought of as being under any scrutiny, like Katie Ledecky, who online gets called a man. So this is part and parcel, and adding in this dubious organization that sounds authoritative, right? IBA. Oh, it's a boxing organization. Boxing's got a lot of organizations. It gives it the kind of credibility and elevates these allegations to something that will break out and be taken advantage of.
Absolutely. And, it behooves people who are invested in a patriarchal hierarchy of gender to try to create a category of woman and femininity that is so narrow that very few people can actually fit into it. I mean, if you actually question any of these people who keep asking, left-wing politicians, like, well, what is a woman? If you point out to them the actual biological diversity among women, it tends to ruin their argument because they don't know how to actually account for the diversity among women. And so the thing that really gets me with this situation is these people love to couch their arguments against trans rights in terms of women's rights and fairness and protecting children and women. And now here they are taking a boxer who has, found success against the odds in a traditionally masculine sport, a woman who grew up in this culturally conservative country and is at the top of her game and achieving her dreams at the Olympics, and dragging her through the mud and making her an international superstar, not because of her success in boxing, but because of these lies that they're spreading against her just to advance their own political agenda. And part of their argument against Khalif has been about, the Italian boxer who she beat, who withdrew from their bout at 46 seconds, Angela Carini, and how, she was crying after their match. And I really want them all to watch the video of Aman Khalif addressing the press after beating the Hungarian boxer when she clinched the medal, where she's in tears and just saying, I want the world to know that I'm a female. I've always been a female. And it really makes me sad to think that this exciting moment for her, a moment that really should be just about unbridled pride, has been tainted by this bad faith attack against her.
I want to point out that the Taiwanese boxer has gotten some support at home. The president of Taiwan wrote on Facebook, "In recent days, Taiwan's people have been indignant at the slander against her. Facing the challenge, Yu Ting is fearless and uses her strength to crush the rumors. Let us continue to cheer for her." So there is support out there for these women from their families and from others.
And about Khalif, I think one of those sad things is that her remarkable personal story has been obscured by all of this. Yeah. The fact that she sold scrap metal to fund her boxing dream. And the thing that's really, really worth noting is that she grew up playing soccer with boys. The boys tried to punch her and attack her because she was a girl. And the fact that she had to learn to dodge the punches is what got her into boxing. And also her father didn't support her because he didn't approve of girls or women being in the sport. Sounds like a woman to me.
Christina Cauterucci is a senior writer for Slate, the host of Outward, and the host of Slow Burn's Season 9, Gays Against Briggs. We'll post links to her Olympics coverage about this boxing story on our show page. Christina, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Up next, we'll do a little Olympics smorgasbord.
This podcast is brought to you by Slate Studios and SAP. AI is moving so fast. If you don't get reliable and relevant advice, your business might miss out. Welcome to Dear Artie, an advice column from SAP, where we tackle the tricky questions at the intersection of AI and business. Here's our expert, the technology futurist, Ian Kahn.
Hi, I'm excited to dive into today's question.
Dear Artie, the supply chain has been a friend and foe to my company. Can AI make us more resilient? Signed, Supply Chained to Uncertainty.
Hey, Supply. Here's how AI in the supply chain can help. AI can massively automate data analytics and understand the movement of your goods. AI can point out weak links, market demand trends, optimal logistics, and other important aspects that impact the top and bottom lines for the business. Take the example of a large grocery chain that has hundreds of vendors spread through the country. In some cases, you may need to reroute shipments to other stores, such as in the case of fresh produce, a good that can go bad very fast. Managing such a supply chain is heavily dependent on the data provided, and AI can help optimize this information so that your supply chain works at its optimal levels.
Embrace AI with confidence. Head to sap.com/AI to learn more.
If there's one thing sports fans love as much as watching games, it's talking about them, especially the stats. Here's one that's super simple to remember. Discover automatically doubles the cash back earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cash Back Match. That means with Discover, you could turn $150 cash back to $300. That's right. You could put it towards some memorabilia you've had your eye on, or treat yourself to a premium sports network. You earn and Discover doubles. See terms at discover.com/credit card.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
All right, I think this has been billed as our Olympics potpourri segment. And I'm going to start
I think I said smorgasbord, but potpourri works too.
All right. Well, I think my analogy works better because I'm going to talk about something that has smelled during these Olympics and that hopefully our potpourri will cover. We didn't get to it in our first segment, but the NBC call in the 100 meters in which Lee Diffie declared that Kishane Thompson was the winner was not great. Not a good call. And as I was watching, I can honestly tell you, I thought that Noah Lyles might have won. And that's not necessarily because I saw the 5,000ths difference. I think it was because I was watching Noah Lyles the whole race and I was following his trajectory and it seemed like he might have gotten him at the end. But at the very least, I think it's like in an election, right? If it's too close to call, it's too close to call. You don't say who the projected winner is.
Why don't we play the clip for people who may not
All right, let's play the clip. There's an
Olympic gold medal waiting for somebody who wants it the most. Now Thompson starts to wind up. Curley's going with him. This is close. Jamaica's going to do it. Kishane Thompson is a gold medalist on debut.
I'm reminded of the meme, Morgan, that you had one job meme. I just don't, I mean, you can tell us, like, I just don't understand. I realize it's a very difficult job to call a race and narrate it that lasts less than 10 seconds. But how can you say that someone won the race when it wasn't clear who won the race? It's just it was a terrible, terrible call.
For me, the bigger broadcast transgression is the promotion of the cliche that the race goes to the person that wants it the most. This is everybody's job. All 8 of those men have worked for 4 years for this or 3 years for this. It is their full-time job. They all want it equally. Want has very little to do with it. Want is not a variable here. The race is going to go to the person that runs the fastest. Because if I want that medal more than Noah Lyles wants it, Noah Lyles is still kicking my ass. Well, I got nothing to do with it. That's what bothered me straight out of it. Like, rather than calling the race, he's telling me about who wants it the most.
Look, if any of us were standing at the starting blocks, we would have wanted it too.
Yes. One has nothing to do with it. But
Morgan, our expectations around cliche avoidance, I think, should be really low. I think the bar of just like not saying that the wrong person won the race, I think that's fair as a viewer to expect that.
There was some Twitter chatter that Lee Diffie does similar things when he calls auto racing. And Diffie did, to his credit, on Monday morning, tweeted, "The men's 100 was epic and closest of all time. My eyes and instincts told me that Kishane Thompson won. Obviously, that wasn't the case. I shouldn't have been so bold as to call it, but I genuinely thought he won. I got it wrong. I'm thrilled for Noah Lyles as his story only gets bigger."
Yeah, to the naked eye, to my naked eye, it looked like Thompson had won, but my naked eye can't discern 5/1000ths of a second. Like for broadcasters, there's a big premium on and a lot of emphasis placed on like making the call that you think people are going to remember, because everybody wants to be remembered as down goes Frazier, the person that said down goes Frazier. Right here in Toronto.
Here comes Diggins, our favorite call.
Yeah.
Here comes Diggins.
When Joe Carter hit that walk-off home run in the 93 World Series and the radio announcer says, "Touch them all, Joe. You'll never hit a bigger home run in your life." Like, people remember that. So you want to have that one-liner that people remember.
Yeah, people are going to remember this one too.
This is the other way for people to remember you, right? Is to call it wrong.
But it was more than that, Josh. It was more than just the call. I think NBC flubbed in a lot of ways. They were confused. I mean, yeah, everybody was confused, but there was no explanation about what was going on. We didn't know what Lyles and Thompson were looking at. They didn't explain how a winner is determined, like which part of the body has to cross the line. We got that from Mike Tirico in the studio when a producer frantically figured it out. They didn't even post the standings on screen, the results on screen afterward. I thought it was a production fail that was born of chaos, but NBC is usually pretty good with the Olympics, given the millions and millions that they invest in preparing for these kinds of moments. It was kind of surprising.
Well, so on Monday morning, also here in Eastern Time, there were the women's apparatus finals in gymnastics, the floor, and Simone Biles was expected to win gold, as she typically always does in these floor exercise apparatus finals. And what Laurie Hernandez, who's been doing the color commentary on the live daytime coverage, NBC has a different primetime team, but what Laurie
gymnast.
But yes, what Laurie Hernandez said was, if she hits the routine after Rebecca Andrade did her routine, if Simone hits the routine, she's going to win. Simone lands fully out of bounds on 2 of her tumbling passes, and it's still, Simone's going to win. She's got this. And then Simone Biles doesn't win. She finishes 0.03 of a point or whatever below Rebecca Andrade. And a couple of things. Laurie Hernandez did a bad job, I think. But I think it was more a production failure. There was no graphic or analysis going in saying, this is what Simone Biles' margin of error is. This is what these deductions are. It was just like vibes, right? It's like, she's got this. If she hits, she's going to get this. And I do have higher expectations for NBC. I think they generally are good with the graphics, with having the like analytics person, or just there needed to be somebody else in that booth saying, this, like, technically, specifically, like, let Laurie Hernandez say, you know, she didn't nail this landing, or her legs were split, or
here's what happens when both feet go out of bounds instead of one foot goes out of bounds.
But I just thought it was like a really terrible failure. Again, like, I don't think I'm being too harsh. Like, if the announcer says she's going to win, or she's just won this, and you could see in Simone Biles' face that she knew that it was going to be close. They had a camera on her saying, I think Rebecca's got this. It was just like, again, you have one job, which is to say, either be right. If you're going to like go for it and like take that shot, Morgan, and like call your shot and say, you got to be 100% right. Or just say, I don't know. It's totally fine to say that you don't know.
That is the thing, is that, one, you see this in a lot of sports. I'll give you an example. I remember talking to Fran Charles, who might still be with the MLB network, but he used to call like a lot of the old Boxing in the Dark and Boxing After Dark and these HBO boxing cards.
Boxing in the Dark would be interesting.
But I asked him, you know, who were some of his favorite people to commentate with. He said, I loved Lennox Lewis because Lennox Lewis just always had this feel for where the fight was going. He could tell you what was about to happen based on what he was seeing and what he knew about the fighters. This other analyst / play-by-play guy, I'm not going to name him here, but he's like, that guy, he was hard to work with because he would always call the fight he thought he was going to see rather than the fight he was actually seeing. And you would just have this conflict between what this person is saying and what's happening in the ring. And so sometimes, like, I think Lee Diffie thought Kishane Thompson was going to win. He called that race as a guy who was calling the race he thought he was going to see, not noticing Noah Lyles kind of creeping up on the outside. And the same with the gymnastics commentator. She called the event she thought she was seeing. She thought she was going to see Simone Biles win. And even though the evidence said something different, I'm calling what I think I'm going to see. And yes, it does do a disservice to the viewer, especially in the Olympics, because these are sports we don't see all the time. So we would appreciate someone to really get in there and do it concisely, but decode these sports for us.
I was asking Rebecca Schumann, who we've had on this show a bunch of times, and she was explaining kind of what happened in the gymnastics. And what I said to Rebecca is like, you have to be, and Rebecca is, one of the like world's leading experts on gymnastics and the scoring to have been able to follow the broadcast or understand what was going on. I know nothing. And so I'm completely in their hands. And I felt let down. Like if I'm watching baseball or football or basketball, if they screw up, I'm like, okay, I've watched a million of these games, but I need them. I needed them in that moment, and they failed me.
I'm surprised you went with Simone Biles, because the thing that confused and pissed me off about the broadcast was what happened later when Jordan Childs of America was the final competitor in floor. She does her routine. Her score puts her 5th. And then there's an inquiry, which I guess is like a protest by the
throwing
Americans.
the challenge flag.
Threw the challenge flag. The Romanian gymnast, Ana Barbosu, was on the platform with the flag, like celebrating, thinking she got the bronze medal. And then the script flips and Jordan Childs gets the bronze medal. And again, the announcers couldn't explain what was happening.
They explained it like 10 minutes later.
They backfilled later and explained that there was a skill that Childs didn't finish during the team final and performed it again here, and she did it better here, and they thought she shouldn't have gotten a deduction, and the deduction was worth 1/10 of a point, and that 1/10 of a point pushed her past the Romanian. But that was like 5 minutes later. In the moment, it was just pure chaos. It was, and this is like, the announcer, Laura Hernandez, is a former Olympic gymnast, right? Who's lived her life in the sport. Like that basic element.
That I give more grace to, because I think
I just wanted to know what was going on. Like, what's an inquiry? What are they looking at?
They could have definitely said, what's an inquiry? They could have done that better, but I'm sure they were totally in the dark about what the judges were looking at and what was being evaluated. So it makes sense to backfill that.
Yeah. The specifics maybe, but just here's what happens in a situation like this.
Right.
A coach files a complaint. The judges review every move. We're not sure which move they're actually looking at. The move could be worth up to 1 or 2/10 of a point. That could be enough to elevate Childs from 5th to 3rd. They didn't even say that.
In the spirit of potpourri / smorgasbord, I know we've only got a couple of minutes left, but I got to get my licks in on the tennis. I don't know if you guys were able to watch any of the Alcaraz-Djokovic final, but there were moments in that match where I thought, not only is this the best level of play or quality of play that I've ever seen, but it didn't seem even theoretically possible for players to be playing at that high of a level. I was just stunned. And I've watched so much tennis. I've watched Grand Slam finals between these two men before, obviously between Federer, Djokovic, and Nadal, Murray, and all possible combinations. But a thing that often happens in tennis and in all sports that are mano a mano is that a lot of the times, even with great players, they're not playing great at the exact same time, like on the exact same point or the exact same game or the exact same set. And for most of the match, except for just a few key moments in the tie breaks, which Novak Djokovic won, winning his first ever gold medal, they were both playing almost at or near their peak for every point of the entire match. And it was just incredible to watch. And there's been this long and I think appropriate conversation about tennis's place in the Olympics. It's there with golf. It's there with basketball and soccer as well as these sports where the Olympics is not the most important thing for these athletes. But the way that what it meant to Djokovic, it was the only thing he had not achieved in his career. What it meant to Alcaraz in tears, saying he let down Spain afterwards.
And Djokovic in tears too, like weeping.
Totally. It's obviously conditional. There's some players who just didn't go because at the tournament in Washington where Stefan and I live this week, there are a lot of players who chose to play in DC at this mid-level tournament rather than playing in the Olympics. It doesn't mean this much for everyone. But in this circumstance, in this match with these players, the sport achieved a sort of like level of both genius and sort of depth of feeling that I never thought I would see from tennis and the Olympics. And I just wanted to take a few minutes just to say that.
Morgan, what's your last, I'll give you one shot and then I'll take one at a moment that you're thinking about or you enjoyed.
A moment that I'm thinking about, I really can't get my mind off of that men's 100-meter final. For all the reasons we discussed earlier, plus the fact that it also, again, as a Canadian, we're going to talk later too about moments in sport where you all will always remember where you were and who you were with. I was by myself watching this final, but this race was a lot like the 1996 final, where I remember exactly where I was and who I was with when Donovan Bailey came from way off the pace. And again, just patient sprinting and a really, really fine-tuned knowledge of exactly what you can do and what you need to do to run your best race ever. And this is what we saw from Donovan in 1996, and this is what we saw from Noah Lyles. Again, the patience and the confidence not to panic when you get to 30 or 40% of the race is done. And he's still in last place. And he's like, you know what? It'll be fine because I'm about to shift gears and all these guys will see. And we saw it. I can't get my mind off of that.
It was amazing. I'm going to go with an obscure sport, archery. There was a golden arrow in the men's final. This was awesome. I don't know why I was watching it, but it's the Olympics. You know, it's the smorgasbord of sports.
Our South Korean listeners are going to be like, obscure sport? What is this like idiot talking about?
Exactly. Brady Ellison, this American dude with like scraggly hair and beard and like multiple Olympic medals, is in the final against Kim Woo-jin of South Korea. They are tied and they're all like getting 9s and 10s. They're like hitting the center target most of the time. They're 70 meters away holding these gigantic bows and arrows. And it comes down to basically like sudden death. And Kim nails a 10 and Brady shoots a 9 that's right on the border, but it wouldn't have been as good as Kim's 10. It was a great moment in like obscure sporting Olympic history, which is what the Olympics are. And then Kim said afterward, if Messi and Ronaldo are the best in soccer, then maybe we are the duo in archery.
It's called a golden arrow, right?
Golden arrow.
Like a golden goal.
Yeah, golden arrow. Love it. I don't know if it's actually called a golden arrow, but somebody said that on the NBC broadcast and it sounded good to me.
What's the golden arrow now?
That is all for this episode, but we've also got a bonus episode that's live right now. We will talk to Morgan Campbell's wife, Perdita Felicien, former Olympic sprinter and CBC sports correspondent. We'll talk to her about her Olympic career and the women's 100 finals won by her compatriot, Julian Alfred of St. Lucia. To hear that, subscribe to Slate Plus on Apple Podcasts by clicking try free at the top of our show page or visit slate.com/hangup plus to get access wherever you listen. The episode is available right now. We will see you there. Our show notes are at slate.com/hangup, and you can email us at hangup@slate.com. And don't forget to follow the show and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Our producer is Kevin Bendis. For Josh Levin and Morgan Campbell, I'm Stefan Fatsis. Remember Zelmo Beatty, and thanks for listening.
If there's one thing sports fans love as much as watching games, it's talking about them, especially the stats. Here's one that's super simple to remember. Discover automatically doubles the cash back earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cash Back Match. That means with Discover, you could turn $150 cash back to $300. That's right. You could put it towards some memorabilia you've had your eye on, or treat yourself to a premium sports network. You earn and Discover doubles. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.